Grazie,
Many thanks, Mrs. Corsini. And now the second speaker in the economic area, Mrs. Sara Giusti. The global scenario of the gold industry during COVID-19. Mrs. Giusti is graduated at the Varese University and economist at the Study and Research Academy of Intesa San Paolo. She focuses on industrial policies, in particular fashion and the districts of Tuscany and Umbria.
Grazie, buongiorno.
Thank you. Good morning. In my presentation, I will have a first part where I will present the results of the gold industry in 2021. And the second part will focus on the current competition framework and the challenges which are emerging. So let's have a look at what happened in 2021. Despite the fact that in 2020 the jewel sector was one of the most hit sectors because of the lockdown, in 2021 there was a rebound in terms of turnover, which made it possible to recover the pre-crisis values and even overcome them. And this was very significant, even greater than in the manufacturing industry and even better than the fashion industry, which has not yet filled the gap generated in 2020. These are the value results, but you see also the trend in terms of quantities is very favorable. So the sector actually was able to recover that rebound of the world demand. In 2021, the world demand of gold jewels went back to 1919 values, and it was more than 2,000 tons. And in the right picture, we see the subdivision into the various markets. So a major contribution was given by the Indian market, which practically doubled demand. And this thanks to a good recovery of the economy, a release in the restriction measures, which caused a new trust, and there was an increase in the number of marriages. So even though there were still restrictions in terms of number of participants, nevertheless, gold jewels were bought for marriage events. Well, in China, we have a 6% growth as compared to 1919. Certainly, there was a greater demand due to the economic recovery. And we noted a shift towards design objects as a reaction to the needs and requirements of younger generations. Well, also in America, we have a good recovery. And the demand for jewels probably was able to increase despite the fact that there was also a very slight increase in journeys and tourism. So this explains the situation that we see described here. So a significant growth of exports. In 2021, exports were equal to 6.6 billion euros. And again, here, based on Istat, we had an increase in terms of values and also in terms of quantity. And this took place in all the main markets. We see a good consolidation of the U.S. with more than 1 billion euros. The U.S. is the first market for our exports, thanks to the progress shift towards high-range products. The same applies to Turkey and the Arab Emirates, which is the second country. You see that they recovered the sales in terms of values, but not in terms of quantity. And if we look at the three main hubs that together represent 70% of exports, well, we can note that all in all, the sum of the three districts, Arezzo, Valenza, and Vicenza, could go beyond the values of 2019. So it's important to consider also the distribution and logistic policies carried out by the main luxury companies. For example, if we look at exports towards Ireland, well, that is explained by the role that this country has in fiscal terms and also in logistic terms. So this is the way in which we can analyze these flows. And then another aspect which is very important at a territorial level is that we are commenting these stats in terms of values. And there may be a sub-estimation of the recovery in Valenza, for example. So this is to explain the major recovery of the sector. And now it is necessary to look at the current competitive situation. Now, if we had presented this survey in January, probably we would have talked about an economic recovery which was at very high levels. But unfortunately, the war in Ukraine has added extra tensions, which go and worsen the situation that we inherited from the pandemic. So here you see the main channels and the main effects. So the first channel is certainly international trade. And of course, sanctions against Russia have caused a stop in the exports. And then the issue of traffic. Think of the Black Sea route, where there are many ships which are stopped there, and many shipping companies which have decided not to work in Russia because it is too expensive and too risky. And then the second channel is the financial one, bank crisis, company crisis, and then the other two aspects, which are the ones which are of greater importance for the gold sector. Certainly the issue of the prices of raw materials, with an increase in prices and uncertainties in terms of sourcing of gas and oil, and then the price of precious metals and the difficult sourcing. And then another issue has to do with uncertainties, which have to do with investments, which have to do with planning of investments, but also uncertainties in terms of consumption. There is a fall in the buying power of families, and this will reduce consumption. Now, in terms of the impact on Russia, well, sanctions caused an immediate devaluation of the ruble, and sanctions because of sanctions, the Russian banks could not support the currency, and so there are many uncertainties. There are forecasts which estimate a double-digit GDP fall. So there is still a very high tension. Now, if we move from Russia to other countries, well, we can say that this crisis will have an impact on Europe, because European countries have strong links with Russia, and by means of international trade, we will have an effect also on the trade balance, and then there will be an impact on propensity to saving. And unlike what happened during the previous crisis, this propensity to saving will fall. So, and this will have an impact also on inflation. Here we see a representation of the forecasts and how they have been modified after the 24th of February. So watershed date in terms of forecasts. So we see that there is an increase in inflation, both in terms of general inflation and core inflation, due to the cost of energy. But here we have another important comment to make. It's true that we have a higher inflation, but it's appropriate to say that as these are shelter assets, an increase in uncertainties and inflation could partly promote more demand. And then another channel of propagation of these tensions is due to the crisis of mobility of logistics. On the left, you see the Italian exports towards Russia. And we see that exports towards Russia already decreased after 2014. Currently, the Russian exports is about 5%, and also the tourist factor has fallen, although it is a type of customers and clients who can spend a lot of money. Now, going into greater detail, we focused on exports. Again, we see that exports to Russia do not have a particularly high importance, from 5 to 0.5. So these are direct exports. So perhaps they can be underestimated, because we're speaking about a sector where not always sales are carried out by direct logistic means, but there can be intermediate hubs. So it's data that we have to interpret, so to speak. And this applies also to district specialization. We see that the 3 Italian districts specialized in jewelry, direct sales to Russia do not have such a big importance. And then finally, we would like to give an original view of the situation based on some figures that we analyzed together with the industry. These data were published a few days ago, and the members of the Jewelers Club were asked what would be the effects of the current crisis on sales. Well, the impact is particularly negative. There is also a question of size, because smaller companies, of course, will have a greater impact. But it's interesting to note on the right what are the sectors which are most hit. So first of all, the prices of raw materials, and also the issue of transport and logistics, and then the lack of raw materials. And then There is another issue which is typical of this sector, which is the reaction capacity. So 70% of the sample answered that they are revising the organization of their companies in terms of price policies, but also in terms of structural projects related to sourcing methods and marketing channels. And then we would like to close with this summary. This is a result of an investigation that we have had carried out in January, where we asked the members of the club what were the most important means in order to react. So first, we have training and education of human capital, and then second, digitalization and research and development. So there are two aspects that we should highlight. Training and innovation are certainly sectors that companies want to develop, and they are not alternative in nature. So for them to work, we need to have a synergy between the two areas. Thank you.